Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss whether Rishi Sunak is now at the weakest he's been since becoming Prime Minister, given that he appears to be letting Lee Anderson decide election strategy, has abandoned almost all talk of his 5 pledges, is taking steps to prevent any journalists who are not considered friendly within 100 metres of him, and now the Tory vultures are circling ahead of the election as a very vocal critic of the Conservative Party wants to stand as a Conservative candidate. And we mustn't forget that Boris Johnson may be still sniffing around after the Henley seat as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, really, I suppose the mark of the strength of a political leader is how consistently they are applying their strategy. They have a strategy, they apply it, it's working, they carry on, progress. With Rishi Sunak, it's genuinely impossible to know what his strategy is. Or maybe it just keeps changing so often that it's indistinguishable from just making everything up on the fly. Sunak began by talking about professionalism and integrity. It immediately got off to a bad start when he reappointed the Home Secretary, sacked less than a week earlier for endangering UK security. It didn't get much better when it turned out he'd appointed 2 bullies and a tax cheat to Cabinet as well. But the emphasis on professionalism and integrity was important. He was following in the wake of the heady excess of Boris Johnson and the utter insanity of Liz Truss. It wasn't enough for Sunak to simply be more sober than Johnson and more grounded than Truss. He was standing atop the ruins of a country brought low by over 12 years of Tory rule. Boris Johnson won the 2019 election, partly on the basis of hope. He didn't even bother to defend the record of Cameron and May. I cannot remember an election where the Conservatives have successfully defended a record. They've made no effort. It's like, oh yeah, that was rubbish, but we'll be better. In fact, Boris Johnson attacked the record of Cameron and May. He was going to be different, though. He would be the big state Conservative leader. Of course, it was all rubbish. So badly did he betray voters with his promises that it could be argued that Labour are right not to try and pitch a grand vision to the people, which might sound too good to be true, of a population badly burned from all the Tory gaslighting. But Sunak nonetheless had to try and use the same trick as Johnson. There was no grand promise of a better life of such, people wouldn't trust that. It was simply a promise that his government would be normal, that it would govern with respect. You know, respect for the rules. There wouldn't be a one rule for you lot and no rules for us anymore. 8 months later, and he's trying to accuse the Labour Party of actually being part of a people smuggling ring. Might be funny if it were happening somewhere else, but I live here. We get multiple reports a week of the people being failed so badly by this government that their lives are an unnecessary misery. To say nothing of those dying needlessly through poverty or a lack of health or social care. At the start of the year, Rishi Sunak made 5 pledges. He said that people should judge him on these pledges. He said that. He said, these are what you judge me on. I mean, it's up for us to decide what we judge him on, but that's what he said. Now he doesn't even want to talk about them. He still throws out the odd comment about inflation or stopping the boats. But halfway through the year, with no progress reports from him, he's not sat down and goes, right, well, this is the progress we made on all these, because he hasn't. A few months ago, Lee Anderson, having just been made deputy party chair in order to tame his motor mouth, said that the Tories should fight the next election on culture wars and trans issues. A ridiculous idea. The Tories have been pushing culture wars throughout Johnson's time in power and still losing ground in the polls. You know, once Labour under Starmer achieved a lead in the polls in late 2020, consider what allowed the Conservatives to retake it. What happened? It was the rollout of the vaccine. Granted, the success was a political deception in many ways, but it didn't matter. The public saw the government doing something which they thought they were handling well, and rewarded them with confidence in the polls. After the summer, they'd expended that one-trick pony, and the Conservatives didn't follow it up with any other achievements or plans, so the polls narrowed again. Labour retook the lead at the end of 2021, with Johnson and the Tories mired in sleaze after the Owen Paterson scandal and Partygate. But in actual fact, the narrowing of the polls had started to occur, before those. And Labour have never lost that lead since the end of 2021. They have pushed and pushed their culture wars, the Conservatives, and Labour have remained ahead in the polls. Has it seriously never occurred to them in strategy meetings to think, well, we did retake the lead at one time. What caused us to do it? Doing something that the public wanted us to do. Have they never thought of that? It's utterly ridiculous that Rishi Sunak, with all the available evidence, could think that he shouldn't bother trying to address the key concerns of voters and instead try and distract them with culture wars. Defer to Lee Anderson. Let Lee Anderson decide our strategy. My goodness me. Because that's what's happened now. Sunak has all but confirmed that his strategy now is to push culture wars and weaponise the trans debate. It is going to get ugly, it's going to hurt people, and it isn't even going to do the Tories any good. People care about their living standards, they care about whether they'll be able to keep their home, they care about whether they'll be able to get health care, more than not care about the climate disaster which keeps being brought into sharp focus. They do not care about culture wars when their own immediate standard of living is at stake. Culture wars are really for people whose lives are all right. They've got time to worry about stupid, petty things. Labour, on the other hand, they're talking about the economy. They're talking about jobs, the environment, healthcare. In between the pointless culture wars questions from Tory client journalists, they are crowbarring in plans to address what the voters want. The Conservatives were, up until this point, paying lip service only. They were acknowledging the issues, but not showing any signs they had a plan. Now they're not even talking about them. At this point, the Conservatives have no hope of winning the next election because they are not even talking about the issues that voters want them to, let alone giving them confidence they can solve them. You know, too few MPs are even trying. The leadership have no plan for it. It's all right Sunak getting angry at apathy from within his party. As I've said before, he's done nothing to inspire them. But even if the next election is lost, unless a truly bizarre chain of events unfolds, you'd think they'd at least want to put themselves in the best possible position to rebuild, wouldn't you? Their hopes of winning next year may be basically zero, but they can certainly work towards coming back at the following election. They don't have to think that they're going to be out of power for 10, 15 years. They could easily at least form a plan to come back straight away. Now, there are two things that they would need to focus on to do this. The first would be limiting their losses in the next election. The more seats they retain, the fewer they need to target at the following election. But also, the more seats they retain, the smaller Labour's majority. A smaller majority means more difficulty getting serious reforms passed by Parliament and less progress to show at the following election. But with no serious effort from the Tories, it's hard to see how they even limit the damage. At the moment, their plan is to get lucky with the timing of the election itself, which they do get to decide. But the second thing they need to do after the election is unite around a credible leader. After the election, Sunak will step down. A new leader will be chosen. For the Conservatives to move on, they need a couple of things. They need a leader who responds to the electorate, and they need their factional battles to be buried. So I see in the news yesterday that David C. Bannerman wants to stand as a Conservative candidate in a nice safe seat, of course. He's not interested in fighting for it. No, a nice safe seat, if you please. I mean, he'd better join the queue because there's quite a few wanting to do that, including the hapless David Frost and many current MPs who want to chicken run from what are now very unsafe seats. But Bannerman is not really the sort of colleague a Conservative MP would want if they are serious about winning a future election, much less the next one. He was in on the ground floor at the creation of the Conservative Democratic Organisation. This is the Boris Johnson personality cult, which has been openly attacking the Conservative Party for months, trying to trip them up, trying to damage them, trying to cause them trouble in local elections, by-elections. It's also the organisation which organised basically a vicious letter bombing in email form of the Conservative members of the Privileges Committee who found Boris Johnson guilty of multiple contempts of Parliament. They've also been working to try to deselect moderate Conservative MPs who were actually, either on the Privileges Committee or spoke in favour of it. You know, there are people in politics on both the left and the right who have this attitude that their way is best. They believe that. And we all believe that our way is best. But they will only work with those who concur to the nth degree. It's like, well, what's your view on this? Oh, I agree with that. Oh, you're my friend. And what's your view on this? Oh, no, I don't agree with that. You go away. You go and stand in the corner now. Go away. Thank you. Any deviation at all is either weakness or betrayal, and they will judge you as their enemy. This would be a toxic presence in the parliamentary party because first, winning a first past the post election requires a broad consensus. It requires a lot of people to compromise and form around a general agreement. Second, it might work to an extent if his politics were at least shared by the bulk of target voters. If he was at least politically where target voters are, you get more leeway. But they're not. His views are well out of kilter of the majority of the population. This is exactly the sort of candidate Sunak should be blocking from standing in any credible seat if he has any regard for the party he leaves behind. You know, tell him if he wants a seat, if he wants to stand as a Tory candidate, tell him you can go and stand as a candidate in one of the seats in Liverpool or Manchester. See how you get on there. You know, he's a former deputy leader of UKIP. He's one of the entryists who, under Cameron, when the Conservatives came back to power, left UKIP to infiltrate the Conservative Party in order to bring about Brexit from the inside. He's no friend to most Conservative MPs and certainly not the moderates who want to rescue their party after the election. Someone like this would not only seek to stoke toxic factionalism from within, making it impossible to win the following election, but will be instrumental in choosing the next leader. And he will not be choosing a leader who wants to unite people. Then we also need to remember that Boris Johnson is living in Henley now. Fairly safe seat, whose current MP is standing down. Sunak would need to block him as well. And then you think to yourself, so there might be quite a few candidates who would seek to sow disunity within the Tory party for their own purposes after the election, rather than unite it and fight for the next election. So Sunak's probably going to need to block quite a few candidates. But will he? Will he block Bannerman? Will he block Johnson? Is he now too weak in a position to carry out any form of leadership at all? Does he even care? I still don't know why he became a Conservative MP or why he became Conservative leader. Does he have any regard for the party at all? Was it all just personal greed? Because he's so weak, it's actually really hard to tell. But given that absolutely no strategy that he announces seems to last more than a few months now, it's hard to see him as anything other than in the weakest position he's ever been. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.